Finally, I'd like to talk about the difference between a struct or a class declaration and a definition. I have this vector2d struct and the player stats struct. Now I'll use the player stats struct as an example. As I'll talk about in a future lesson on classes, the struct and the class is very similar in C++. So what I talk about here also applies to classes. You can see I have the same struct here, right? But what is the difference? Now, of course, this is not a function that executes some code. This is more like a blueprint, as we've discussed previously. Okay, but as we discussed with a function, you can also sort of have the prototype or the declaration and have that declaration separate from the actual definition, so you can sort of define it later. Now, it's important to note it's not quite the same when it comes to structs, but there are some similarities in the fact that you can have a struct declaration and a struct definition. So here I'm declaring the struct, and with the declaration you can think of as my name is Bob, I'm a human, or my name is Kiki, I'm a dog, or something like that. You know, it's the name of something and what is that particular thing. It's a dog, or you know, it's an integer or a float or something like that. But in this case it's a struct. You also have classes and so on, as we'll talk about going forward. So the definition usually comes in, again similar but not quite the same as a function, where you have the body, right? You have a body represented by the opening and closing curly brackets. Now in the body of a function definition, you will say, okay, this is what the function does, this is how it calculates something. Now in the body of the struct or class definition, you will specify the fields or the members, including the member functions of that struct or class. So again, typically with the definition you have a body, right? I'll scroll down to main. This is where we instantiate player stats. We have these two objects. So I can go and right click on player stats. Then we have go to definition and go to declaration. You can think for a second what will happen if I click on go to declaration, for example. Alright, so I'll just click on this and we'll see what happens. And you'll see it takes us to over here. Scroll back down, right click on player stats, and now we'll go to the definition. And of course that'll take us to the definition where we have the body. The body is the actual definition. It says what are the fields or the attributes, you know, the members of the struct. Whereas the declaration simply says, okay, I'm player stats and I'm a struct. And that's it, right? You know its name and you know what it is, but you don't know what it does. You don't know its members. Same with a function. You can see its prototype and the parameter list, and maybe have comments that explain what it does, but you just see the declaration, right? Then you need to actually go and look at the definition in the body of the definition to see how the function works. You can build and run this program again and you'll see it still works fine. Now I said it's not quite the same thing. You cannot go and cut this out and paste it after main. So I have main here, I have this here. This is known as a forward declaration. And then you have the actual definition down here. Right now it seems fine. But if I build it, we'll actually get a bunch of errors, undefined struct and so on. The main reason for this is that the compiler doesn't know how many bytes it has to allocate for each instance of the player stats. Now you can create pointers to that particular type, but we haven't talked about pointers just yet. And we also haven't talked about how you can separate out your files between header files and source files, where you have circular dependencies and stuff like that. So don't worry about this too much at this point. I will talk about it again later on. But as you can see, this doesn't quite work the same way as you can do with functions. With a function, I can have a prototype up here, and then I can have the definition following main. That doesn't quite work with the separation of the declaration and the definition of structs and classes, because again, when it reaches this line here where it has to create those objects, again, remember program execution happens sequentially, then it knows, okay, this exists, this is declared, but it's not defined yet, so it doesn't know how many bytes it has to allocate for that. Okay, I'll actually just undo a few times. Now the thing is, if I go and remove the declaration, so I only have the definition now, right? This now counts as both the declaration and the definition of the player stats struct. So it's correct to say that currently this is the definition and or the declaration, but I prefer to use definition when it is in the context here where it is actually defined. So if I go and right click on here now, and I go to the declaration, it will take me to there. And if I go to the definition, it will also take me there, right? Okay, that is going to wrap up this video. I just wanted to provide a bit more detail on these things and hopefully clear up a few more things for you. I'll see you next time.